going to get started. I think we've got a quorum here now. There's a lot of meetings going on in a lot of different places. We got people presenting bills in various and sundry committees. They're going to be drifting in and out, some of them. But we're going to get started here in just a minute. All right, now we've got several people signed up on House Bill, I guess this is 314 about the barbers and cosmetologists. Okay. All right, good. Well, let's get started, have a word of prayer, and then we're going to get started. Lord, we do thank you for this day. Thank you for giving us this time to come together. Lord, we just ask you to bless us with wisdom and guidance from you today as we make decisions affecting the citizens of our great state. Thank you for these representatives. Thank you for those others that are interested in the legislative process and the bills that are before us. Go with us now in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, Representative Roberts, are we calling you first? Looks like you're up here, huh?
Yes, sir.
I mean,
I tried anyway, Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir, you did. You've Madam Tankersley, would it be all right for the chairman to go ahead right now? All right.
Mom always said ladies first. So
Well, that's what I was going to.
you can sit back down if you'd rather.
Well, if it's all right with the gentle madam over here, we'll go ahead and let you present, and we'll try to get yours out of here, and then we will hear hers next. Let's see. You got your microphone on, I think, down there
Yes,
in front of you. All right. We're looking at House Bill 110. The number 25 down there is... Right, never mind. I got it off. It was just blinking. Okay. We got a current sub. Let's make sure we're all working off the same paperwork. Have you got...
The new sub that I have, Mr. Chairman, is 2743S.
2743S. That's what we got? Should be in your folder. Ladies and gentlemen, that should be in your folder. Okay. All right, give us a quick rundown.
Okay,
Let's see what
Mr.
we get here, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I bring back before you today House Bill 110 by substitute. There's only two changes that's been made to this sub from the previous version of the bill that we discussed the other day, but I will quickly go through. Section 1 deals with the definition of consumer fireworks. I want to make sure that we understand, again, what's in this definition does not include model rockets, model rocket engines designed for propelling recoverable aerial models, toy pistol, paper caps, ammunition used for sporting, hunting purposes, wood or wire sparklers or other sparkling items which are non-explosive, non-aerial, and contain 75 grams or less of chemical property per tube, or a total of 500. That's what we already currently have. This right here does not address them. It's not in the definition. But I will say this: there is one of the changes occurs on line 44. Underneath in the old bill, on line 44, we actually added in the substitute. And it'll be on line 44 after the word or the number 1124, we added and shall include a tent, canopy, or membrane structure. That is an add to this bill versus the first version that we had. Then we go on into Section 2, and that's where we define lawful conduct. And you will see that and on line 101 and the new version, or excuse me, in the new version, we actually took out the words tent, canopies, or membrane structures that was actually in line 101. So we're now making it unlawful to sell in tents, canopies, and membrane structures. Then as we move on through, we get...
We're making it lawful, right? You said unlawful. We're making it lawful to sell.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. If I said that, I apologize. I apologize. Right. We're now making it lawful. That's correct.
Okay.
I apologize for that. Section 3 deals with our licensing provisions. In that, it talks about penalties. It talks about the permanent facilities, temporary stands, and the fees that go along with them. It also talks about stores as well. We get to Section 4, and it gets into the enforcement side of it, which is our state fire marshal. Section 5, I'm sorry, deals with the penalties. Section 6, we actually go in there and make sure that we clarify that you can't have the aerial lanterns or the lanterns that float into water, those types. And I've never been to a wedding or whatever where they've at, but we've seen a lot of them. You see them on TV at different things, and some of you may have been to those types of events. But we make sure that in here we make them unlawful. Section 7 deals with the excise tax. That is my understanding that the Rules Chairman on the Senate side will be carrying a constitutional amendment on that excise tax as far as the dedication to it. And Mr. Chairman, I know I went through that pretty quick, but we pretty much went through the bill the other day. So I'll be glad to try to answer any questions, but I did want to point out the two changes on line 44 and line 101. Basically, those two changes allow for us now to add tents, canopies, and membrane structures for the sale of full-line fireworks.
All right, sir. We have two people signed up to speak, I believe. Can we get those speakers up, and then we will ask questions. Thomas Weaver. Mr. Weaver, would you like to come up and present before the committee here? You can do it there if you want to sit there or go over to stand, either one. Thomas, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Maxwell, members of the House Regulated Industries Committee. I respectfully ask for your favorable consideration and assent for a potential do-pass recommendation on this legislative proposal here before you today. I know that there are those on this committee who may have reservations against decriminalizing consumer fireworks in the state of Georgia. However, all of the neighboring states that share coterminous boundaries with ours allow it. And there's no need any longer, in my mind's eye, to continue to prohibit conduct which is wholly lawful in more than 2/3 of this country, and which is lawful in every other state that borders ours. It brings business to this state. It is something that our residents here and that everyone in your district more likely than not currently participates in. I would be remiss if I failed to mention that many people, as we already are aware based on previous testimony in the subcommittee, do travel out of state to acquire these fireworks and bring them back. We already know what's going on. So I respectfully request that we make lawful this behavior, and this is an opportunity before you today to bring that potential to reality.
Very good, sir. Thank you for being here. Appreciate those good comments. Sir, well, yeah, the lady had a question for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who do you represent, or do you own a fireworks company, or are you planning to sell fireworks in the state?
No, ma'am. I'm just a plain and regular citizen. I represent myself. I don't represent anyone else's interests.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. Rick, let's see, wait a minute. Justin Kernan. Sorry, Justin. And you're with GMA? All right, let me get you turned on up there. Thank you, sir. Hi, Justin.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and also to Chairman Roberts, the author of this legislation. We appreciate the hard work that the chairman has put into this proposal, and GMA is currently evaluating this legislation. We have interest in working with the author as well as the committee to address specific concerns. In the previous meeting, we passed out a few copies of those of some of those concerns with language that we've constructed to address those issues. Basically, it'll be modeled similarly to the language in Georgia Code that relates to alcohol sales. If the bill passes in current form, our primary concerns would be where fireworks can be sold, We feel that the governing authority of every county or municipality or consolidated government should be authorized to adopt a local ordinance authorizing the sale of fireworks for areas within such governing authorities' respective jurisdictions. Where fireworks can be used, we feel that local government should be granted the ability to set reasonable restrictions on locations where consumer fireworks can be used as to prevent usage in areas where there's a potential for fire or causing greater nuisance. We feel that local governments can determine these two items best because, you know, we are the governing authorities for those areas. Local taxation, and I have not seen the most up-to-date version, so I'm not sure if the section is correct, but in the section of HB 110 that contains provisions for an excise tax that would go to the state's general fund, we feel that local government should have some type of split with that excise tax, seeing that our local law enforcement agencies would be the ones responding to any of these issues and helping to protect citizens in any of these cases. And also, we would not mind any of those funds being used strictly for public safety purposes. And also, as far as the permitting authority, we feel that local governing authorities shall set forth ascertainable standards in local licensing ordinances upon which all decisions pertaining to these permits and licenses should be based. Due to the fact that sales will take place within local governments, the local governing authorities should be able to provide the licensing and permitting. And there was a previous bill brought in front of, I think it was a subcommittee, HB 15 by Representative Scott Turner, that had some language that actually echoed the elements of local control that we were favorable to. But as I previously stated, we have a desire to work with the chair and the committee in order to address these issues in the future. So I would stand for any questions.
All right, any questions, Justin, this time? I think we've had some discussions on some of that.
Yeah.
We sure have, sir. No questions this time, Justin.
All right,
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you presenting your points. Armand Sessonet? Yeah, I've butchered that name. I'm sorry. Armanda? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Whoop, wrong one. I'm sorry. Whoop, read the wrong number here. Rick Ward, Academy of Pediatrics, House Bill 110 is what we're on. I'm sorry. Sorry. Rick.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I was on the wrong line.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I'm Rick Ward. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I'm distributing a letter to you now that is a coalition of physician groups that we put together in opposition to this bill, the Physicians Coalition Against the Expansion of Fireworks in Georgia. I'd like to quote a couple of comments from it and make a few other brief comments as well. This includes ourselves as pediatricians, 1,700 pediatricians in the state of Georgia, the American College of Physicians, which is an internal medicine specialty, the Georgia Academy of Family Physicians, the Georgia College of Emergency Physicians, the Georgia Society of Ophthalmology, the Georgia Osteopathic Medical Association, and others. I just want to read the key line, I guess, and that is that we oppose these bills, and while some try to minimize the dangers of a full line of fireworks, they do pose considerable risk of injury and to the health of adolescents and younger children and even adults. In the second paragraph, we note that currently in the U.S., every year there are 11,400 emergency room visits. These are emergency room visits due to injuries from fireworks. They're not the kind of burn that you'd say just put an ice cube on it and we'll go back to the picnic, etc. These trigger trips to the emergency department. And more than 4,000 of those trips to the emergency department involve children. And the data shows that most of the injuries are just where you would think, to the eyes, to the hands, and to the face. And then one other statement that we've highlighted there, which is sort of is in the no kidding department, which is the states that have more conservative fireworks laws and limit the range of fireworks see considerably less fireworks injuries. I guess I would also like to point out, too, and maybe take exception to a previous speaker, is that every neighboring state does not have the full line of fireworks laws. If you look at Florida's law, for example, they specifically prohibit firecrackers, torpedoes, skyrockets, Roman candles, and, quote, any containing explosive or flammable compounds. So that rules out the cherry bombs and the M80s and all that other kind of stuff. So I think that every state makes its own decision about what's good for its citizens. And to us, the idea that, quote, other states are doing it simply doesn't make any sense. And then finally about our population. I did some quick math. There's about 10 million people in Georgia. There's 318 million in the country. So that means we have about 3.2% of the nation's population here in Georgia. If you took that number of 11,400 trips to the emergency department, that means on a pro rata share, we get about 365 of those. And we have conservative fireworks laws. And most of the people at CDC would tell you that the states with the full range of fireworks laws are going to see an expansion of almost 50% of those. So that's 175 burns, lacerations, trips to the emergency department that pediatricians and our other physician colleagues just don't think are worth it. We understand some of the desire for this, but the exchange, in our view, is not worth it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Mr. Wood? Thank you, sir. All right. Questions for Chairman Roberts on the bill? Any questions this time? Representative Martin, you have a question?
I do. Chairman Roberts, I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to understand. Going back, and I've pulled up the NFPA 1124. The designation in the federal code, what's defined. And first, let me tell you, I'm not trying to hurt your proposition. I just want to make sure I understand what we're doing. Appreciate the committee. But in the first definition over on line 23, it says consumer fireworks retail sales facility, and you use the definition in the federal code, which says a temporary or permanent building structure, consumer fireworks sales stand, tent, canopy, or membrane that is used primarily for the retail display and fire. Then your second definition, you refer to that, which is a stand, which in federal law specifically excludes other than tents, canopies, membranes that is used for. But then in our code in Georgia, we're adding those back. So have we not just made those two definitions exactly the same?
You know,
Oh, sorry, sir.
No, you can keep me off. That's okay. I don't know that I quite followed you with all that, but let me say that to answer your question, we are changing the definitions for here in the state of Georgia by adding the tents, canopies, and the membrane. Let me get back over here to where and membrane structure. We are altering that definition in this bill.
So isn't it true, if I'm reading the federal definitions, the only difference then between what's defined on line 23 and what's defined on line 43 is one of them, the stand can be not greater than 800 feet.
I think you're correct. I do not have that definition. I left it with me.
So just,
but I will take your word for it.
Okay. So what I'm getting at. So what are we then in the bill? I'm trying to find the location. You use those two definitions in the bill to define. I mean, what are their definitions? Is it related? You and I had spoke offline about the nonprofits.
Yes.
And are you using one of those definitions for a nonprofit and one without?
We are. We're trying to make sure that we do not cut out the nonprofits here from being able to sell in tents and all.
Okay, which, Mr. Chairman, if you give one thing, I agree with that. We don't want to take away things, but I guess my concern, and I'm not sure we're going to get there today, but late hour, I'm not going to hold you up, or I'm not going to do that. I don't know what the committee will do. But I'm still concerned with these consumer fireworks, which are a little bit bigger. I believe it's fair to say a lot more expensive, being put in a tent, membrane, and otherwise. somebody cutting the back of that thing and thinking, oh, it'll be cool. Let me just throw something in there on fire and see what's the whole place go out. That scares me a little bit. I mean, I know it's them putting their inventory out there, but I could see that there could be tens of thousands, $100,000 worth of inventory out there. I guess they would secure it if that happened, but that's the only concern I have, and I won't belabor the late hour with it. But the tents and membranes of something just sitting out with all these things that might have a little more value might create a what was it your seatmate said, an attractive nuisance.
Attractive nuisance, yeah, concerning the deer. I understand, and I hear what you're saying. I would hope, I can't say that they would, but I would hope that if they've got that kind of inventory there, they would make sure that somebody's there watching it. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I think that would go back to a lot of these stands or temporary when it comes to tents and all. A lot of those are set up a lot of times in your parking lots of your Walmarts and that type of environment that does have security there. So I would assume that, but you're correct. There's nothing in here that prevents or makes them have that security there. So I understand your concerns.
Again, Chairman, I don't want to hold up this bill. I think just to make sure as we move forward, the definitions, since we're kind of touching the federal ones but redefining one of them, and yet in the federal definitions, they refer to each other. I want to make sure we don't get one of those definitions where it's referring to itself.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Chairwoman Cooper.
At the proper time, Mr. Chairman, I have some amendments I'd like to put forward.
All right, any other questions by committee members?
Mr. Chairman, I would say this, if you would allow me to. I think the chairman from the Senate says that he is addressing some of these local issues from the revenue standpoint from local governments in his CA.
Okay. So that's being discussed and looked at over there from the GMA and local government taxes.
Yes, sir.
Very good, sir. All right, Madam Cooper, what are you going to propose for us today, ma'am?
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman and my personal friend, with all due respect, first of all, I feel like David fighting Goliath on this, but I think you know my stance on the problems with these fireworks, and I
respect your opinion.
I mean, I really have trouble even talking about it, but if we're going to have a bill, I would respectfully ask that you maybe consider some changes. First of all, the First Amendment, I would move that we strike lines 83 through 86 and lines 83 through 86 and 91 through 95, and then in line 149 that we change the age from 16 to 18. What this would do would mean that 16 and 17-year-olds, wouldn't be able to possess and transport consumer fireworks. It would raise the age up to 18 for everything.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could ask you a question and on this, the one thing that concerns me about that, and I don't know from a law enforcement standpoint, from the transporting part of it, let's say that the chairman has a grandson that's 17 years of age, and they're in his vehicle, and his grandson is driving that vehicle, and those fireworks are in that vehicle. Even though he's in there, could he at that point be convicted or charged with this because of the transporting part and he's not 18 years of age? If he's driving and operating the vehicle and they're in his vehicle, that's a question I have, and I don't know the answer to that. That would be the only concern I would have about that, is that, are we at that point setting ourselves up for somebody to maybe get charged with this from that you wasn't trying to get at? I know what you're trying to get at, and I respect that. Question is, are we setting something up for the possibility somebody could be charged?
Well, I mean, there could be any possibility for any bill that.
Well, I agree with that.
Chairman, Chairman, but I would think that unless they were in actual, that they were the ones that had bought the fireworks and were transporting them and so forth, it would be, if the chairman was with them, then I think that it would be an adult with them transferring it, but
I don't know that. That more or less attorney would have to tell me that.
My daughter would question that at times whether I'm an adult with my grandkids or not.
Okay. Well, who's the adult and who's the child?
That's
And
her-
the chairwoman would too, of allowing you to have fireworks.
That's my daughter's
No,
question.
that would only be in your case, Mr. Chairman, for bringing the bill. So,
I understand. I understand.
did you hear me say that the chairman of this committee is a dear friend of mine? Now, not that you're
Oh, I
not.
thought you were referring to me.
No. So anyway, but that would be my first proposal, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we want to take them. How many of you got? 3, madam?
I've got 3, but you want to do it one at a time?
We have a move for an amendment on lines 83 through 86, 91 through 95. Is there a second by the committee? We had a second? All right. I guess the posture's to you can vote on these at one at a time, or, well, what's the author's opinion on that?
Well, I would think you'd need to vote on those two because they basically addressing the same
those
thing
two-
at the same
those
time.
Yeah,
two.
would you stand for the agreements, or
I have some
opposed?
concerns, but at the will of the committee.
All right, the author's sort of letting the committee have a say on that.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I just have a question. The Chair Lady Cooper offered 3 things. And we have a motion and a second. Are we including all 3?
No,
of
no, we're
those?
we're voting on these one at a time. We're going to
Okay.
take each
No,
individual.
no. Okay. That was one.
One group of amendments.
That
Right
was one group I meant to be together because I
Yeah.
have 2 others,
Yeah, this is just the First Amendment right here.
which includes all 3.
Right, all 3 of those line changes. That includes all 3 line changes.
Okay. Go with me, go with me. Okay.
All right, don't confuse me over there.
Yeah, can we clarify the amendment?
Strike lines 83 through 86 and lines 91 through 95.
Okay.
And then line 149, you would change it from 16 to 18. That's the First Amendment we're looking at. Okay. Strike lines 83 through 86, 91 through 95, and then line 149, change the age from 16 to 18. That's the lady's First Amendment. All right, everybody know what we're voting on? Huh?
149 changed 16 to 18.
Yeah, 149 changed 16 to 18.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What are the surrounding states that sell fireworks? What age do they have?
I don't know the answer.
Like
to that.
Tennessee, Alabama,
We don't have an answer on that.
I don't.
South Carolina?
I don't
I used to
know.
buy them when I was 16. I guess it was legal.
Terry?
Well, I think one of the things, the concern I have in looking with the assistants under the age of 18, we have a lot of nonprofits. Chairman Roberts, am I right with that? A lot of nonprofits. And I'm thinking about Boy Scouts, youth groups, things of that nature. And you know, in order to be an Eagle Scout, you have to get it before your 18th birthday. You got a lot of kids in Boy Scouts that are not 18.
All right, can I change, Mr. Chairman, can I change it then and we vote on the first part of it, striking lines 83 through 86 and 91 through 95, and then we can vote on the other? Will that make it better?
I'm sorry.
If I change the amendment to where we first vote on striking lines 83 through 86 and 91 through 95, that takes out the assistant part.
Okay.
We vote on it first and then vote on and then I'll drop the one on line 49 if that's
Okay, so you're going to withdraw that amendment?
the last part of it. So
Okay.
I would make the amendment, strike lines 83 through 86 and 91 through 95.
Okay, one more question. Line number 12, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. It was answered. Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, back to, I can't get 14 to go off over here. The amendment now is going to read strike lines 83 through 86 and 91 through 95, not make any changes on line 149. The ladies moved her amendment. Do we have a second on that? Okay, Ms. Bennett, second. Any discussion? All in favor of the changes to these lines, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign? No. Okay, no. Okay, say no. Okay, that amendment did not pass. All right, second amendment, madam.
Okay. On the number 2 would be on lines 96 through 97, add R in between permanent building and store, and strike temporary consumer fireworks retail and stand. I think you've added on here, have you, Mr. Chairman? I mean, are we saying, I guess the point of this is, and it's been hard to, because of the changing LCs that we're working off of, this would not necessarily bother in the next amendment where you could still do it for your nonprofits. But if people are going to come and invest in our state and putting in and renting or buying a permanent building, then they're paying property taxes and they're investing in the community. They are hiring people in the community. They're probably going to be bigger buildings and, with full-time employment. When you let a company that just comes in and puts temporary stands up or membrane buildings or whatever it is, those are temporary things. They don't really bring more prosperity or work to Georgia, if you want to carry selling fireworks to do that. But they're temporary, and they really help the person who owns the fireworks business more than they contribute to the state of Georgia. And very often across the country, they have trouble collecting the taxes that these people owe. It's very easy to get up and, abscond in the middle of the night. The other thing is, I can remember growing up before we had certain laws and so forth, not in the state of Georgia, but driving down the road and seeing all these signs for all this kind of crappy looking buildings that sold fireworks. That's not what I would like to see across the state of Georgia. I think personally they're offensive. And so this would make it where we have permanent buildings, but we don't have temporary stands and membrane buildings and so forth. And I have another amendment that would allow the temporary stands for nonprofits after this one.
Okay, I think we've taken care of that one already, ma'am, in line 103, I believe.
You think it?
And what we did over on the line 44, I believe that took care of.
Do you really that takes care of them? We're not going to have the temporary buildings?
Well, I'm not sure about your amendment. What do you, Chairman Roberts, are you looking at the amendment?
Well, I was trying to, Madam Chairwoman, can you state that back, please, for me again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, because it's changed, and Chairman Roberts, I'm sorry, because I haven't seen this.
No, it's the same lines, looks like.
Yeah.
96 or 97, add R in between permanent building and store, and strike temporary consumer fireworks stands and consumer fireworks retail stands. But I think now 6 through 97.
I think that line 103 through 106 actually takes
care of it? Well,
yes,
tell me
ma'am.
what the stance is now, where we are, because I thought maybe it did. Are we now saying that only 501(c)(3)s, like the Boy Scouts, can have the temporary stands? They're the only ones.
That's what
the
I
rest of
understand.
them have to be permanent buildings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that.
That's what I
You
understand.
took that amendment. I thought it, but it was a little confusing from what you added in the definitions. You confused me, Chairman Martin.
I'm just reading federal law. Oh, wait a minute, that explains.
That explains.
Thank you. I believe that's taken care of, madam, in the temporary stands. We specifically said it's only the nonprofits that can use these temporary tents, canopies, and stands.
Thank you for changing that. I appreciate that.
Chairman Martin, you going to muddy the waters again for us?
Yes, sir.
Probably.
Don't do that.
Anytime one invokes federal law, one definitely muddies it. I know this is serious, and maybe we work with the senator over there, but what worries me here is we're talking about temporary consumer fireworks retail stand. We've defined this consumer fireworks retail stand according to federal law, but in that definition, that's what I was trying to get to, a recursive definition. In the definition in federal law of consumer fireworks retail stand, it says a temporary or permanent structure.
But it does not include tents or canopies.
But it says a temporary or permanent. So what's a temporary permanent structure?
That's if you build a 4x4 building out here, you build a plywood building and move it out, is my understanding, something like that. That's why we put specifically in there tents or canopies, so that these nonprofits could operate. My understanding of a stand is got to have a floor in it and a top. That was my understanding of the definition of a stand when we went through this. So that's why we added the other, Chairman.
Okay, in the federal law, it mentions
Temporary
that a
stand.
stand is temporary or permanent in the law, and then we're applying an
Tents and
adjective
canopies to that.
temporary on top of that.
We're adding temporary. We're adding tents and canopies,
That's correct.
membrane structures on top of that. Yes, sir.
It's not that part that bothers me, Mr. Chairman. It's the word that we have temporary in front of something that's already defined as temporary, so that confuses me.
Okay. Well, maybe nobody else is confused.
Perhaps not, sir.
Okay. 25.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, so they can currently sell the existing fireworks in a temporary structure, and this is going to allow them, if they're a nonprofit,
To continue.
to sell what they can currently sell plus the higher class of fireworks.
Whatever they want to sell if it's passed. My
Okay.
understanding.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. No other amendments? What's the, Chairman Cooper?
Okay, I had one, but because it's changed the LCs, I would like to ask the author and to the chairman on the Senate and the Rules Committee on the Senate side and the author of the other bill. Mr. Chairman, I have real problems with the fact we keep talking about nonprofits, and then we talk about not letting young people under 18, basically, although you allow 16 and so forth, 18 to transport them. I think if you talk about Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts selling these, we're sending the wrong message. We're basically, I mean, those are iconic groups in our country, and it's just like Girl Scout cookies. Gee, if they're selling Girl Scout cookies, they must be good for you. And I think if you have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts selling really heavy fireworks, you're sending a message to young people that these are okay and there's not a problem with them, and you have to be really, really careful. And also, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are a whole lot younger than, 16 to 18. They go way on down. I just would like to respectfully ask that you consider not letting, if you have to expand this bill, to consider letting them sell what we've already approved, but not expanding that to these new, more dangerous type of fireworks. And since the LC has changed and everything, I just would ask that that be considered as you go forward.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I got several phone calls from scout troops around that wanted to make sure, and that's up to the individual scouts, their families, their parents, what they want to do. But I got several phone calls about making sure that we were not going to take their ability away from them to do this. And that's why I worked with the chairman, making sure we hopefully had correct language in there. All right, one more, number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I can understand what this is going to look like when we're talking about these nonprofits selling fireworks. The nonprofits have to get permission from the property owner to set up the tents, and then there's no time. I mean, they can set a tent there 24/7, or is there any kind of ordinances like that? I mean,
They got to get a permit that's good for 90 days. It's good for 90 days.
that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little concern with that. I have a little concern with that as well.
I've seen them after a couple of weeks usually.
They're probably only going. They're probably not going to use 90 days. They're probably going to set up right around the 4th and then right around New Year's, and that's going to be about it. I doubt we'll see them stay there. The original version had 180 days, and we pushed it back to 90 days, trying to get them time to get the permit and plenty of time to be able to set up. Because once they get that permit, it's only good for 90 days. So they might not set up that full 90 days, but they might go in and decide we're going to want to have these, let's say a week before the 4th of July or whatever. So they go in and get it a month ahead of time or whatever. So that's kind of where that 90 days is in there at.
Representative Harrell?
To the author, isn't it true that with the 90 days in the state statute, we're not usurping locals' control for their local ordinances? So, for example, if a local jurisdiction, county, city, has a special use permit for a temporary structure in the parking lot of a commercial shopping center, that they would still need to get that local permit. Is that not correct?
Go over that one more time now. Let me follow you, because I would actually right now say no, that is not correct.
Okay. So what we're doing here is by state permit, we're authorizing a temporary structure in a as someone had mentioned before, a mass merchandiser's parking lot
That's correct.
without the need for county or city approval at all.
I think, you want to correct me on this? I think that under this bill, the local governments still would have zoning, but they could not prevent anyone from selling full-line fireworks in a county or city.
And that's not my question about the product, the firework. But, for example, a number of local communities may have, if you've got a strip shopping center, they'll say up to 5 times a year they'll issue special event permits. So you've got the fair there, but that prevents a series of what becomes a permanent operating business in the parking lot of an otherwise commercial retail structure. So they wouldn't be able to prevent this particular use. They couldn't discriminate
Correct.
against fireworks. But if they had such ordinances in place, then this person that chose to have a temporary tent and chose to serve fireworks would still get that local, 30-day, 90-day, whatever permit. Is that
don't
was
have to
my
get a
understanding?
permit
Is
to put it up there.
does that jive at least with your intent?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the locals would still have
I'll say so
input.
over that. All right. Posture of the committee now, we need a move, or we need to move the bill forward or not move it forward. What's the mind of the committee? Number 13.
Make motion to pass.
Got a motion?
HB 110.
HB 110 by substitute, which is LC 362743S. We have a move and a second. Any further discussion on this piece of legislation? No, we did.
We did not have an amendment.
No. We did not amend it in committee. I was looking at the substitute. I'm sorry. You're correct. This is past the substitute to House Bill 110 LC 362743S. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did not amend it. Any further discussion? All in favor, let them know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Okay. Ayes carried. So this bill has moved out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Tankersley, come up and talk to us about 314, please. What? Sorry, madam, you were awfully kind to your chairman there.
Oh, glad to do that. Let me just take a minute. We ready, Mr.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Okay.
Talk to us about House Bill 314, I believe. Let me get my LC out.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I do have with me again today Lisa
Can you
Durden.
get to the mic there, darling? Speak up
Sure.
so we can hear you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Be happy to. I do have with me again today Lisa Durden. She's with the Secretary of State's office. I am presenting House Bill 314, and we're operating off of LC 362723S.
All right. Everybody have that copy, I think.
Yes.
Okay?
All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Since the last meeting, I've emailed and delivered information on the changes that are in this particular bill. I would like for you all to know, in case we didn't say it at the last meeting, that we already have around 24, 25 other states that have merged the boards of barber and cosmetology. I think maybe the best way we can work through this bill is to work off of what I would call the tracking sheet from the Secretary of State's office. And Mr. Chairman, I would defer to you. We can either just go over the changes that are in bold, which are the substantial changes, and the rest of the sections are either there that have just simply been pulled in from the Barbers Act, Practice Act, or they're minor changes that make both professions consistent. So it's up
Whatever
to
the
you.
whatever the madam wants to do all the members have a little tracking sheet with a letter here? Y'all have that? If you,
It should be in your folder. I brought additions over today. You've been emailed, and I think you were given one on your desk.
This is a lot of information, Mr. Chairman. We might have to review it over a day.
everybody got a copy? Okay.
Would it please
hit the
committee?
highlights. Why don't you hit the
Okay.
changes? Hit
Okay.
the major
All right.
changes,
All
and
right,
the other
let's-
stuff we've
let's-
discussed already.
We're going to hit the changes with the hopes that you've read most of this. If you haven't and you have questions, we'll be happy to take those. But the first thing that you're going to see in bold is a new Barber II definition, and that definition simply does not require training to color or dye hair, but it does allow the Barber II position to still cut hair and give shaves. Okay, the other information that's on the tracking sheet down to our next in bold is code section 43-10-8, and it does say here once again that in this particular section we're covering the Barber II definition again. One important change, it's not a change, it's addition about the military. Where do I have that? Just a minute. Oh, okay. This updates the language under this particular code section to allow active military veterans and their spouses to obtain a license after moving to Georgia if they held a valid license in another state. Okay, that's a change. Then down in 43-10-9 requires an applicant to have passed the exam within 24 months after obtaining the required credit hours. And this is just going to give them more time once they pass that exam to apply. Okay. The next one requires foreign educated applicants to obtain an independent credentials evaluation by a provider approved by the board. The board does maintain a list of approved providers because these foreign applications are hard to evaluate, and we want to make sure that they do meet the requirements of our Georgia board. On page 2, under code section 43-10-11, requires salon, shop, or school owners to take a health, sanitary, and safety course before registration in an effort to prevent people from incurring fines after registration. And then it goes on. I would like to say at this point that when I read back into the bill on line 637, the language is may require. So from what I've been told, our folks that go through our technical college are well versed in health, sanitary, and safety issues. We do get some who have not had as much training in that, so it is an option that it can be required. Next, under section 43-10-12, this particular board has gotten a lot of calls from people that have left a particular school and try to get the records from that school later, but the school doesn't turn them over, or they haven't kept records. And so this language requires schools to hold records for at least 5 years. And if the school closes, it's very important that they turn them over to a non-public post-secondary education commission. Under code section 43-10-14, gives someone a longer amount of time, up to 4 years, from the time they are issued the apprentice license to when they take the test, so that the board does not have to do renewals at different time periods, and that does cut down on administrative costs. On code section 43-10-15, line in your bill, line item 918, it allows a committee of the board to hold citation hearings. In the past, it's been the requirement was that it had to be the entire board. So this should help with any backlogs, especially by striking shall and putting may, since we do not want the backlog of hearings to cause someone to be out of work until their scheduled hearing. And Mr. Chairman, I believe there's one more under code section 43-10-18-1, and it deletes this section because we are changing the shop license from being two different kinds of license to only one type, where both cosmetologists, barbers, and apprentices can work there. Under the current structure, barber apprentices cannot work in cosmetology shops and vice versa, but striking this language would allow them to do so from now on. So that concludes the major changes that were outlined in bold. I do hope that this committee will consider favorably this request and give these two boards the opportunity to merge and work together to streamline the process, and one that will work best for the professionals that they serve and the citizens that are involved in their service. So do we have any questions?
Let me ask, we do have a couple of questions here.
Okay.
Ms. Durden, you're with the Secretary of State's office, and you're over this section. I believe you have anything you'd like to add to this. And we also have Kay Hendricks.
Yes, sir. We would ask that we have worked with the boards for the last couple of years on this with Representative Tankersley, and we would ask that the committee pass this legislation so that we can move forward and have a more streamlined process in dealing with the cosmetology and barber boards.
Okay. Ms. Kay, do you have anything to say on that? You're the board chair.
Yes, sir. I would ask that you vote in favor of this because the changes in this will allow us to put more people to work and allow us to be able to protect the consumers at a better, give us better advantage on that. We're restricted by some of the current laws. We cannot allow everybody to transfer from one state to the other. By changing what's in here will allow us to allow more people to come into our state and go to work legally.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Number 22. You have a question, sir?
Yes. The section where it deals with the current or discharged members of the military and their ability to immediately apply for certification here if they've held certification in another state. How is that different from what any other individual who has held certification in another state?
Well, currently, the way the law is written, there was an attempt at that time to allow people who had worked on a military base prior to 1985 to be able to simply be licensed in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And that language has never been updated. And so this would allow someone who holds a license in another state, a military person or their spouse, to be able to transfer that license to Georgia, without limiting them simply to working on the military base or with that date. Is that what you're asking?
So if they worked on a military base, does the military certify them, or do they have to hold state certification?
I would think the. Go ahead, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Currently, and this actually applies to people who are transferring, like they're moving to Georgia for 2 years and then they may be transferring somewhere else. If they're working on a military base, we don't have governing ability on the military base, and they let them work with that license that they have. But by changing this, we can let these people, there are only a limited number of salons on a military base where these spouses can work. By changing this, we can allow them to work in any facility in the state without having to go through the long process that it takes to reciprocate a license. This will give them an automatic reciprocation because they've moved here as a military spouse.
How long is this? How long is the reciprocity process for somebody who's not military?
It can take, currently it can take several months, based on the application and whether it's a clean application or whether the state they're coming from has reciprocal agreements with Georgia.
My experience in the military was they didn't have to have a whole lot of training the way they cut my hair, but
actually it doesn't apply to me anyway.
I resemble that remark.
Number 25.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I applaud your efforts in trying to streamline, but I also had the same question. Why would we not allow anyone coming in to transfer their license and have reciprocity? Because it definitely is too long process for people to go to work in our state. That's my first question.
Well, currently, the law reads reciprocity, which means we have to have a reciprocal agreement with the other state. This act would change the term to endorsement, which means the board can consider the fact that the person holds a license in a different state, and they can review that person's educational and testing requirements that they had in that state and determine whether or not they want to allow them to endorse their license to Georgia.
Just endorse it to Georgia.
So I would like to see us do that for all people that are in that profession and not just military. And then 431011, the safety course that they have to take. So at what point do they have to take that? Are you just going to make that part of the curriculum coming out of school? And what would you do with transfers and moves with that? So would they have to go back if they're moving from another state to take that class?
This would apply to people who want to open a salon in Georgia
Just opening a salon,
Right,
not getting
right.
a license.
And there are people who,
Okay.
there's already CE requirements for people who already hold a license.
Mhm.
We issue, you don't have to have a personal license to open a salon in Georgia. Anyone can do that. The problem that we run into is that sometimes these salons then get cited, and then the owner's responsible for the citation. So then they come in and they say, we didn't know that was a rule or a law. And so this would give them an opportunity to learn what those are prior
Before they
to
open.
be a license.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I have one more.
One more.
So my
Quickly.
last question is on the records, because that also does seem to be a problem with the schools being able to turn over records and finding their records. So it says that only if the school closes they turn it over to a non-public post-secondary, but once they've applied with the commission, do you also hang on to their records so that if they were to apply 10 years later, that if those schools have closed during that time or something's happened and they didn't turn it over to this commission, are you guys able to go back and retrieve those records where you initially got their schooling and training?
If they applied to Georgia, yes.
If they apply to Georgia, you do hang on to those records?
That's
Okay.
a part of their file, their license
Okay,
record.
all right.
Number 11.
I'll wait.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Number 16. Another man that doesn't need a barber shop often, huh?
I don't, but I do go about once every 2 or 3 months.
Sorry, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Madam Chair, do you, the question I have is concerning the military, but it would also apply to some of the other questions there as well. If they get a license here from some other place, is there some time frame they get the license awarded to them? Is there some way to verify that they actually are qualified? What would stop someone from coming in from another state, being military or otherwise? And the reason I bring that up is that we've handled some of these same problems with electricians and all, where they have to, within a year, go back and get some type of certification of accomplishment.
Well, the board currently requires the National Institute for Cosmetology exam.
Would you speak in, but let me turn your volume up there, ma'am.
The board currently has, of course, the educational requirements for licensure, and the person has to pass the national exam, and persons who are licensed have to have CE, and so that's continuing education. So
What steps would be taken if they were found to be incompetent?
well, any consumer could file a complaint with the board, and we get complaints, frequently.
So you would then investigate, assuming that
Yes,
there
sir.
was more than one
Yes,
or
sir.
two.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
One more, number 28. Wade. All right, I see no more questions. All right, we're ready. Number 22.
Move do pass for House Bill 314 by substitute.
Second. Okay. We have several seconds here. Have a move do pass, LC 362723S. Move in a second. Any further questions? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. All right, unanimous, madam. You need to get the rules and fill out your request in time, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. When y'all move this to the Senate, can y'all look at amending that to do the where it's not just military that we give a license to from another state?
There already is in there. The endorsement will do that. Where we put endorsement language, that will do that.
No, that it's everyone, not just military.
Right.
It is. Okay.
Now, if you got any other questions, Madam Bright, take that outside. We've got another bill to take up, please. All right. Let's see. We are now looking at House Bill 225. Chairman Powell, you are up. And all your folks.
Let the games begin.
All right, we got that. All right, whatever y'all want to get. Let me get your mic on. I'm sorry, I had the wrong mic, sir. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ladies and gentlemen of the committee. At the last appearance, we brought forth House Bill 224 at the suggestions of the chairman. There were 3 bills that were originally put out, that were originally introduced to deal with the problems of deregulation of the taxi limo industry and to put certain criteria into the new ride-sharing model, commonly known as Lyft and Uber. After the last meeting, at the suggestion of the chairman of the committee, we decided to move it to everything from House Bill 224 to House Bill 225. For no other reason than that's a cleaner bill number. There hadn't been a lot of poison that's been put into the well out there. As most of the members of this committee are familiar, there's a lot of overzealous support by supporters of these new ride sharing, and there's been a lot of emails that had been put out over the period of time, even as recent as today, when House Bill 190 was on the floor today, that dealt with insurance issues for these folks. A lot of the members were inundated with emails from certain constituents who were just so mesmerized that they said that anything that's put out there can't be good for this particular new phenomenon of ride sharing. So because of that, we moved to House Bill 225. Since the last meeting, and thanks to the prompting of Chairman Maxwell, all the players of this game have come together. I will be quite honest with you, out of being busy handling other legislation, and quite frankly, I thought it might be time for me to back out and let them fight this issue through the end. Mr. Snyder, who represents the limo and the taxi cab industry, the people who are here that are representing Lyft and their legal counsel, and folks that are representing Uber and their legal counsel, they're in attendance today. I'm going to let them, at this time, I'm going to turn over and let them start talking about the issues that they have walked through with. Some things that, quite frankly, I understand that we'll never be able to deal with. You may remember I had spoke at the last meeting that when we undertook this hurdle a year ago, it was about the public safety issues at that time. It was about asking for proper background checks and the vetting. We have made somewhat of there's been somewhat of an agreement. May not be what I particularly thought was necessary as the chairman of public safety, but it's something that's been brought together, and if it becomes the agreement of the members of this committee, then I'll certainly bear with that. Other issues such as taxes and the insurance, of course, is handled via another committee today. So with that, I want to turn this over and let these gentlemen introduce themselves. Let them go through the bill. I have certainly cautioned them that brevity is of the essence. It's not like we don't know what all is in this bill today, or the issues that are to be dealt with. That being said, I would remind the members of this committee, hopefully the parties involved, from the ride sharing to the taxi to the limo people of the state, hopefully that we can bring this together. You may remember that the end result of the study committee back in the fall, which was signed by all 5 of the members. At the end of the day, what they were looking for was parity among all of the various public transportation venues, taxis, limos, and ride-sharing folks, which basically meant deregulation. One of the things that apparently a lot of the folks out there seem to misunderstand, that you've got taxis and limos that are controlled under current Georgia law and local governments, but yet you have a new venue that that's under absolutely no control. So the whole gist of this is to create a situation of parity. Most of that means deregulation of the other industries so that we can move forward with it. Hopefully that they have came to an agreement, and That being said, I'll step aside and let these guys bring forth the product of the last week.
Gentlemen, you want to identify yourself and tell us who you're representing, please?
Surely. Good afternoon, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman Powell. Thank you all for this opportunity. My name is Nick Zabriskie. I'm Policy Associate for Uber Technologies.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chairman Powell, good afternoon. My name is Joseph Wopaku, and I am the Director of Public Policy for Lyft, and I thank you for welcoming myself and my counterpart here at today's hearing.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. All right, go ahead. Whichever one wants to go first.
So, given where we were this time last week, I do, and I'm very happy to report that I do think we have made very significant progress on this bill. There were, I would say, a laundry list of issues that, for which there had not been resolution this time last week, and I think that we have made significant progress on a lot of those issues. And for that, I do want to specifically thank Mr. Chairman, Chairman Powell, but also the people who took time out of their schedule last week to sit in a room for several hours with us after the hearing and to try to hash out some of these issues. And that includes Representative Taylor, Representative Rutledge, and Representative Hawkins. So I do want to thank you for that time. I do think we've made legitimate and significant progress. That being said, there are still what I would call a handful of issues that still remain. I am optimistic that we can continue to work together and get this bill to a place where all parties are on the same page. To that point, even discussions that we've had today prior to this hearing, I think have moved the ball along further in the process. So from a broad perspective, I'm happy to say that we've definitely made significant and real progress. I don't think we're 100% there yet, but I am very pleased with the way things are going, and I am confident that if we continue working together, we can get to a point where everybody's on the same page.
All right, you want to discuss any specifics of your concerns now? I know we talked about a few minutes ago that we're, and we'll be glad if you want to share them with the committee at this time, realizing that we're in a posture where we're going to move something forward and then allow you guys to work at it, your other issues in the other body if we haven't reached an agreement.
Sure, I'd be happy to list out some of those. We do have here some proposed amendments that we hope we can be able to introduce into this process as we move along. I'll just give you an understanding of kind of some of the main issues that we still see at this point. Just to reiterate what my colleague here has said, though, we do appreciate the leadership that you all have shown on this issue, and we are encouraged by the direction that this is going. However, we do have a couple reservations, and just to shed a little bit of color on that. One of the issues that we're trying to deal with in the language, there's some language in there relating to metering that we are just worried is a bit vague and could possibly be misconstrued by some as prohibiting rideshare drivers and limo carriers from using iPhones in conjunction with certain ride-sharing and limo services. So that's one of the issues that we're hoping to clear up.
That's on line 74, I believe. Would you tell us the page number? I believe that was out on 74.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the substitute. Do you have the substitute page? Les here is informed. Yes, page 74.
7560S is what we're working off of. That's correct.
Or line 74 through 76 on page 3. But we've been, as has been mentioned, we're trying to work towards a reasonable conclusion to that to make sure we have clarity across the board.
Yeah, it's my understanding that's more taxi drivers, and I know it says not a taxi meter here, but yeah, we're working to clarify that for you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Moving along, I think one of the other areas that gives us a little bit of concern, former lines 215 to 219. Which deal essentially with there's a requirement in here that all companies maintain a list of drivers. We absolutely have no problem with that. We feel that the language is currently written. It gives broad authority to law enforcement and other government representatives to obtain sensitive information from companies such as ourselves. We think that the language that we would like everybody to consider we think it would strike a better balance for the government investigative needs and Georgian privacy expectations by just clarifying that a subpoena is required when the government seeks information from companies such as ourselves, which is a standard requirement typically in place when law enforcement or administrative agencies are seeking records from private companies. So that's just one piece of further clarification we were hoping to achieve.
And let me mention there, we had the option in there of you guys providing a list every month of the drivers for your rideshare companies, and you didn't really want to do that. So what we came up with was this lines, I think 215 through 19, so that it would be the if law enforcement or revenue department or somebody wanted to come back and get information from you guys, they could request it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just be honest with you, I have a problem with subpoena process in that. If it's, without you guys going through and sending a list every month, this was something that we tried to accommodate you with.
Okay.
We give it as requested, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to point that out as you go through. I have an issue with a subpoena request for something that we could mandate that you just go ahead and send us a list every month, and we backed off on that at your request.
Absolutely.
So
we do appreciate
just a point of clarification.
Surely, we do appreciate the progress made on these issues. I think another piece that I'd like to point out, just in general, we would suggest that it might be appropriate to add an additional clarifying language that would add additional privacy protections for folks. Essentially, we would propose an amendment that would ensure that rideshare network services records, which frequently contain sensitive and proprietary information, not be subject to Open Records Acts. This is just broader privacy protections and clarifications that we would seek to have included in the language.
Now, what line are you on there, sir?
This is just an amendment that we would
okay.
propose including in the text as well.
Yeah, Title 50 is the.
Exempts you from Open Records.
We put that in specifically.
Our feeling is that applies specifically to driver lists, but as a data company, both of our companies are data companies. There's a number of things that we hold, to be proprietary and sensitive. And so, in the event that any of this became available to governments, we would just like to protect it from access by third parties through FOIA request, things along those nature. So we just point that out as another area where we'd like to continue working forward on these things. There's one more piece about staging, which is language that we are working with the industry to clarify. Essentially, we want to make it clear that it would not be illegal for any rideshare partner who is not actively soliciting rides to wait or park in front of a private business. I think we're getting very close to a resolution with the industry on that, with the incumbent industry. But we just wanted to flag that as an issue.
And I'm trying to find the page that was on staging is on lines 51 through 56, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah, and we're working to make sure that's clarified for you.
Thank you, sir.
We're not going to have that today, but we've agreed that that's something you could continue to work on.
And then the last thing that I'll point out, and I appreciate the indulgence from the committee, as I know it's a long day and we're trying to move through this quickly, but we just want to make sure that as we talk about alternative ways of maybe making sure that the industry can appropriate, well, let me rephrase that, the Department of Revenue in the state of Georgia can appropriately capture revenue from these industries in a way that achieves the parity that we're describing. We're just trying to make sure that we can point out the certain distinctions between how our industry and the incumbent industry works, and the fact that a lot of the folks that do ride sharing on our platform are just trying this once or twice, or at most doing it on a part-time basis. And so that's something that we've raised as an issue that we would like to continue exploring, how to best make sure that appropriate revenues are captured in a way that makes sense for higher rides, but that recognizes that our companies don't exactly work in the same manner. So with that, I think those are all the issues on our side. But
I'll only add to that. There was, I believe, a typographical error that everyone acknowed that was an error.
I thank you for pointing that out on line 250.
Correct.
Yes, sir. We have got that noted to be an amendment to the bill. We've got that we put that in the substitute that everyone has on line 250. Drivers shall not be required. We're going to vote that in as a substitute when we go through here.
Excellent. We appreciate that. And then there was one other issue that just literally got raised a few moments ago before this hearing, or actually once this hearing had started, which I believe we are able to work out. It refers to the use of digital permits and what those permits should include in relation to the background checks. I don't think there's any disagreement about the intent, just about what the strict wording is. So I am confident that that's something that we can work out as well. But that may be an issue that was not brought to your attention, so I wanted to make sure that you were aware of it.
You have not heard of that one. You guys keep coming up with something every day. That's a new one. Okay.
We've spoken amongst ourselves. We agreed that there's probably an easy solution to it. So I don't think it's a big issue, but I do raise it just because I don't want to hide the ball.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we were looking for easy issues to solve here at this point. Okay. Get Chairman Robert. Yeah, we can bring fireworks in here and just blow it up. Okay. Thank you. All right, gentlemen. Thank you. We appreciate these. And the taxing issue, I understand you guys still got issues on that. We did give you an option here, and for the committee members, the options on lines page 12, 408, most of page 12 and part of page 13 here, and Les will go over this, I think, in a minute. But we have the option here of paying the sales tax as prescribed by the state of Georgia, or they can go in there and pay an annual fee for master license for vehicles, as described at the bottom of page 12 and the top of page 13. And I know you've got some discussions you still want to continue with that, and I'm open to that, but as of today, we're going with what we've got. Okay?
Understood. If I may take 10 seconds, I just want to acknowledge, you probably see some people in the audience wearing pink shirts.
Yes, we do.
These are some members of the...
Would y'all like to stand up? Y'all can stand up and wave to us. Some of our fine drivers here.
Members of the local Lyft community who take time out of their day to be engaged in the process, and I just want to make sure that that I thank them for taking the time out of the day to come down here.
So we got the pink T-shirts instead of the pink mustaches now. Is that what we're going to?
We have
I see the mustache.
Right
Thank
there.
you, darling. Thank you. I see you. Okay. And the glasses. Thank you for pointing that out, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Les, can you enlighten us some more, my brother?
Sure. Members of the committee, I'm just going to go over with you the 4 points that the bill has changed from the time Representative Powell presented it last week. Obviously, the folks I represent feel very strongly about doing the background check that the Department of Driver Services requires, which involves fingerprints. As you will see in the bill on pages 16 through 19, lines 530 through 636, that process is still intact, but that there is an alternate process, which is what obviously the Uber and Lyft people would prefer, which is their own background check. The folks I represent have some misgivings about that, but this is a process.
Well, what pages, what lines would that be in?
It would be on page 6 of the bill, pages 16 through 19, lines 530 through 636. You will see that somebody can do either the background check that Department of Driver Services requires, which does include fingerprints, or a private background certification, which is performed by either a taxi service, limo carrier, or rideshare network that obviously does not have to have fingerprints involved. Again, I know we have some reservations about that. I know Representative Powell has some reservations about that, but that's where we are at this point in the legislation. So we are trying to be as cooperative as can be to come up with a finished product. So that's the first item. The second item, again, I think Representative Maxwell explained to all of you, we as limousine carriers or taxi services would be required to give public safety a list of our drivers. You've heard expressed the rideshare services reservation about presenting that list. Apparently in other states they steal each other's drivers. There's a big issue about all of this. Representative Martin is correct. That is the Open Records Act exception, so it wouldn't be subject to that. Again, in an attempt to try to be reasonable on this issue, again, they would have to, they could keep this stuff confidential, but obviously law enforcement and governmental agencies have to do their job, and you can't just put up a wall and say you can't have access to that information. And I think requiring subpoenas for every particular incident, I think, is an overkill. And again, they still have the open records protection. That's page 7, lines 215 through 219. You remember in the previous bill we had the issue that we were getting rid of the sales tax entirely because it was antiquated. I know Representative Rutledge and other members of the study committee all felt that we ought to ditch that system because we were only one of 7 states that would do that and come up with an alternative system. Obviously, the $300 per vehicle was still not something that was to everybody's liking. So as you can see, as Representative Maxwell has pointed out, there is a alternative system where you will pay either in bands or you could use the sales tax system. I understand there's a little more work and there's a little more wording that needs to be done, but I think, as the 2 previous speakers indicated, we are dangerously close to getting that nailed down. You've heard in other meetings that there was some concern on behalf of the people I represent that obviously they wanted to have the vehicles easily identifiable by law enforcement, and obviously the decal would have achieved that issue. But there is a alternative that is not totally satisfactory to the folks I represent, but people could have the decal, they could have this certificate either on an app or whatever, but in any case, rideshare networks would have to have a consistent and distinctive signage or emblem on the car when it is active on the rideshare services digital network. So even though I guess there could be opportunities for people to fudge that and not comply with the law, there is a requirement that that has to be done, and obviously penalties for not doing it. So those are the 4 major issues. Again, we would very much appreciate the continued dialogue on this, but we agree with Representative Maxwell and Powell that we need to move this bill forward. I've been here long enough that I know how to count to 30. And I know that if we don't move this over to the hall, that we're not going to have anything else to talk about. We want to make sure we move this bill along and continue to work very hard on the issues. The issues that the folks from Uber and Lyft have just raised to you are certainly issues that we are concerned about. Also, we obviously are also concerned about making sure that we don't lose track of the parity that was talked about in the study committee and the public safety concept that we just can't toss to the side because it's not convenient for everybody. I think that's why Representative Powell started this discussion to begin with, that we want to make sure people go into vehicles that are safe. And although, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we are concerned about the lack of fingerprinting on the alternative check. But I think that we are trying to reach some compromises, and as a result, we would certainly ask that you move this bill forward today out of the committee and allow us to continue to work on some of the wording that perhaps has not been completely perfected. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, we've got a couple of questions here, Les, and let me say I appreciate the opportunity to work with you folks. I know Chairman Powell and you and your folks are not elated at all about the options on the background checks. I understand that. I appreciate your concern and I appreciate your input, and I appreciate the work you've done on this list and your folks. But I think in a spirit of compromise, I appreciate your willingness to go forward with this. If it doesn't work out to our liking, we can always come back next year and do some tightening on it. So that's our option going forward. We'd have several questions. Number 25, I think you lit up before they started talking.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was actually for Uber, but you can answer it. Either one of you can answer it. So the reporting requirements is in lieu of the background checks at this point?
No, you would have both. Everybody would have to have a background check, either through driver services or through the private background check that the particular company is going to do. In the case of a limousine and a taxi company, they would have to provide a list of their drivers to public safety. In the case of the ride share, they would have to maintain their records of all their drivers, and if a law enforcement or a governmental agency requested information about that, it would have to be provided, but it's still, as Representative Martin kind of alluded to, you're still protected by the Open Records Act that a third party like a competitor or whatever just couldn't get the list or something like that. And I understand, and I've read the papers, in other states apparently there's been a poaching of drivers between companies and things like that. But we, as an industry, don't want to get in the way of whether it's the Revenue Department or Public Safety or law enforcement doing their jobs. So this gives them access without these folks having to automatically provide the information either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, et cetera. I am sure I will hear at the end of this meeting from my people, well, can't we do the same thing? But let's see where that goes.
It makes sense to me that they both do the same thing. And then my second question is about the fee for the master license. So they can opt to pay the master license or the sales tax, is that my understanding? And then it also puts the ride share in the same category as the
limousine and the taxis.
Okay.
Everybody is treated the same. Everybody's transportation services, and they could either do the band system that has been set forth on the bill on page 12 and 13, or they can pay the sales tax.
Okay. Well, I know one of the goals in this was to have some parity. So I think if we're doing it for one, we should do it for
and it allows for all three types to be able to do it. That's correct.
Representative Anderson, you have a question, ma'am? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative, go ahead. I'm sorry. I looked at the wrong number here. Number 9. Go ahead, my brother. I'm sorry. I couldn't count down there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's been a lot of discussion and debate about the background checks, and it's a major sticking point. Just to clarify, is there anything that a fingerprint would expose that is not covered on pages 17 through 19 in terms of the other items that would be checked?
You mean the alternative background check?
Yes.
Again, Representative Flood, the GBI, other law enforcement folks in this state are of the view that a background check is just not complete without fingerprints. They feel that that's the piece that can stop identity theft, et cetera. I don't want to redo this whole debate, but obviously they feel very strongly about that. The folks from Lyft and my folks feel strongly about that I represent. Uber and Lyft feel that the background check that they're doing is more than sufficient for the safety of their drivers and their passengers. There's a genuine difference of opinion here. I have talked to every one of you about, and I'm not going to go back on my word about the fact that I just don't believe in my heart of hearts you can really do a thorough check without fingerprints. But, I'm not always the smartest guy in the room. I mean, that's just my opinion. But I think there's a lot of other people that share that view. But again, because of what the chairman said, we are trying to find a balance here. And as the previous representative indicated, we're trying to create as much of a level playing field as possible. My hope is that we don't create a level playing field that jeopardizes public safety. But we're just going to have to see how it's all going to work out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Number 17.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Can you have food brought in?
Can I have food brought in?
We might be here a minute. No, I'm just kidding, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted serious question relative to the master vehicle license. If one chose to go that way, I'm hoping we would not make that. I'm going to use software. If you understand anything, do Mr. Schneider. I'd hope we'd make that sort of a master license rather than what's called a seat license rather than a specific license. In other words, if you license a software product, you can get 50 users as long as 50 people, not more than 50 people are using the product. It could be different 50 people. I just hate to see. I know that some drivers drive and they might drive for a month and then decide it's not in it for them, and some may drive forever. I would hope that if we went with this and either Lyft or Uber or another provider in the future did it, and they chose the one that's between 501 and 1,000, that as long as drivers, cars came and went, as long as they didn't have more than 1,000 on the road, that would make sense. So they wouldn't have to do that. Yeah. I would hope we would do that.
I think that
if that's
the discussions that we have had, and because of the way we've averaged this, et cetera, Representative Martin, is exactly what we're going towards. It's very similar to what we've done with another industry here, that basically when that particular machine or that particular vehicle is out in service, it's covering the total amount you're talking about. So if I have 500 vehicles, they don't have to be the same 500 vehicles, because somebody may drop off and somebody else may drop on into the network that they have. So they would be covered. It is, we are talking about it along the way that you just described.
Well, if we could do that. And then the other thing, and I do when we get later, Mr. Chairman, would like to, under debate, make some thoughts that have been related to me known. But just in the terms of questions, since you used my name and in the open records, the gentleman is right. It does say the open records applies, but it is also clear in there that it only applies to the list of drivers they get. So there is a point that needs to be addressed. If we're going to require them to turn over information or company information that when you subpoena something is not true. I'm not a lawyer, but when you subpoena something, it's treated a little bit different, as it might be evidence in a case or so forth, and it may not be subject to open records. If we're not requiring a subpoena to get it, and it becomes, and it is in the government possession, it is subject to open records if it's not excluded. So I think we do have to be careful that we don't have an unintended consequence. So I would encourage you to work with the chairman and make sure we didn't do that. I just didn't want you to misconstrue what I said, that in the bill it does refer to open records, but it does also say specifically for that driver list. Other types of information might not be covered by that carve-out, and perhaps they should be.
Well, at this point, there's no other information that they're providing.
That was going to be my point, Les. I don't know of anything else we're going to be asking for other than a list of drivers. That's why we specifically put it in here. That's my understanding.
Okay, that's fine. I just saw this afternoon, so I haven't been able to read through the whole thing. I just wanted to, make sure that I pointed out the open records covered it, but it does only cover the list. If that's all you're asking for, then
that's the only thing I see in here that's ever been asked for. All right. I see no other questions at this time. Let me ask for clarification on number 26. I'm sorry, just popped up here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liz, how are we determining the number of drivers that one would pay in these bands?
If you have, for instance, if a taxi company has 58 vehicles, they would pay the $12,050, or they could pay sales tax on every particular trip that they are generating for the use of their vehicles. If a rideshare service had 350 vehicles, based on the averages you can see on lines 423 to 426.
I guess, how are we verifying the number of drivers? How do we know?
That would be, again, subject to requesting the information.
That's what we got to request for the information in there. They didn't want to provide the list of drivers, so we've got that as the Department of Revenue would request it.
Not unlike Representative Rutledge, if you did a sales tax audit, you would be asking for all the receipts, all the invoices for all the trips that were done to see if they actually had paid sales tax on all those items.
So it could be a year in arrears there.
Right.
All right. Line 250. There's a change on your bill on page 8, and I would like to ask that the word "not" be on line 250. This was supposed to be drivers shall not be required to relinquish custody of a smartphone. That was a typo, and it was caught today when we were looking at it, and we went ahead and corrected it before the copies were made. But I'd like to get a move and second and approval to amend this LC 28756OS to include that. Have a move? Got a move and a second. Any discussion? That was agreed to by all parties. All in favor of amending line 250, let them say an aye. Any opposed, like sign. Thank you. So the bill will now be as amended by committee. Any further discussion at this point in time? I don't see any. We got a posture for a motion at this time. Got a move and second. Chairman Martin, you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, just under discussion, I'll be brief, if you'll allow. I appreciate the chair's work, the folks from Lyft and Uber, Mr. Schneider, Chairman Powell's work on the bill. I just want to say this, under discussion of the bill, you mentioned several times we and the folks you represent, and we're not happy with that. I can sit here today before this committee, and I'm a user of one of the services. I've never felt threatened. I've always, I think I relate it to this. I think when I took the app down, I joined a private club that's open to all members of the public if they choose to join. I imagine, both groups work that way. I understand your concern and your people's concern for my safety, and I appreciate that. But the people I represent up in Alpharetta in the 49th District, 54,000 of them, I haven't had one single call that asked me to do any of this. So I appreciate everybody working together. I hope we do this, but I'm the same place I was last year. I am wholeheartedly against regulating this industry back in the 50s, and I am 100% supportive of deregulating, completely the limo and taxi cab market. So I still have vast reservations with due respect to both chairmen that have worked on this and all the members of the study committee. I can sit here today and honestly tell you there is not a single person, not one, that has called my office or sent me correspondence that has asked me to do anything about this. So while I understand the people you represent I represent the 49th District of Alpharetta, and I haven't been asked to do anything. I'm not aware of anybody in the 49th being injured with it. So, Mr. Chairman, I still have reservations and appreciate the opportunity to let me air those.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have a move and second do pass, correct? I heard you got it down, move and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, let them be known by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, like sign?
No.
All right, one no. All right, sir. We thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we look forward to continue working on this. Chairman Powell, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
And thank all the ones that are here today. A couple of announcements. Tomorrow night, I know there's 3 committee, and the chairman apologizes to the committee for the lateness of getting our committee dinner set up. That's all my fault. You can blame me on that. I promise you next year we will start this at an earlier time and try not to be in conflict. But we do have the committee dinner tomorrow. We do have committee dinner tomorrow night. If you've not RSVP'd back to Julie, we need to know, get a head count. I know there's 2 other dinners. Miss Julie's right here. Okay, let us know. And then on the 20, we've got an invitation on. We've got to let them know by March the 13th about a road trip on March the 22nd to the Eagle Rock Studios open house. So you need to, if you should have gotten that, we need to have everybody signed up. They're going to provide transportation for us. So we need to do that. Anything else to come before the committee today? Hearing none, I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.